Hey guys, welcome back to Mo's Game Table. Today we're going to take a look inside Red Strike, Air, Land, and Naval Combat in Central Europe, 1989. This is a game designed by Yves Rettel and is published by Vuca Simulations. Well, this game's been getting a lot of attention lately, and deservedly so. This is a nearly 5-inch deep box full of greatness from Vuca, and they've done another fantastic job, as they always do. Top quality production, and the subject matter is very close to my heart. I love hypothetical World War III, so this is one I've been really eager to dig into. So let's take a look at the back of the box and see what this game's all about. Now, I'm not going to cover all of the text on the back, but I do want to give you what the setting for this game is. The situation: July 1989. While Gorbachev is on a state visit to Romania, Soviet politicians carry out a coup. Backed by the Red Army, they declare the president an enemy of the state and condemn him to exile. In Bucharest, Gorbachev asks for, and is immediately granted, political asylum in the U.S. The grip of the Politburo and Red Army is tightening. In response to this sudden escalation in Cold War tension, George H.W. Bush immediately cuts short his visit to Poland, cancels all remaining meetings in Eastern Europe, and flies to Brussels to meet with Gorbachev and the North Atlantic Council, the governing authority of NATO. Their response to the coup is to call on all NATO members to break off diplomatic relations with Moscow and begin openly supporting pro-democracy groups within the USSR. Unable to accept the interference in the internal affairs of the USSR, the coup leaders ordered the newly formed Stavka to send the code word Tsar to all military personnel in the Warsaw Pact. The plan is brutal in its simplicity: attack and destroy capitalism. Then there's an explanation of the game itself. Then we're going to get down into game components. We get a 56-page rulebook, 48-page scenario book, 1 operational map, 1 strategic map, 10 scenario maps, 2006 counters, 2 player aid booklets, 82 cards, and 2 10-sided dice. Unit scales: on land it is divisions, brigades, regiments; air is regiments, squadrons; sea, groups of ships, individual capital ships. Time scale: 1 turn equals 48 hours. Map scale: operational map is 28 kilometers per hex, and the strategic map is 280 kilometers per hex. It is for 1 to 2 players or 2 teams. Complexity and the solitaire suitability are both rated high at 8. And the game is recommended for ages 14 and up. So let's take a look inside and see what we get. Remember, I was saying nearly a 5-inch box. You can see how deep that box is. Start off with 2d10. Got 2 decks of cards. One thing I want to mention about these cards is I know there's been some confusion online. People have seen these and thought, oh, this is a CDG. This is not a CDG. These are optional rules that use these, so it's not part of the base game. A couple of trackers. We have a pad of Air Defense Network hit registers. The rule book, scenario book, the player aid booklets, and we have a really thick bunch of different other player aids, as well as some scenario maps, things like that for some small scenarios. A whole bunch of counters. Remember, there's 2006 counters in this game. And then we've got all of our maps. I'm just going to dump them out here because we've got several maps. We've got the strategic map, the operational map, and then we have some other maps that are going to be used for different scenarios. So let's set up the maps and take a closer look at the game. Now we'll take a look at the maps that come with the game, and there are a bunch. So we're going to go through each of them and you get a feel for what all of them are going to be doing. Start off with B1, which is the Fold-A-Gap map. This is Battle 1 because there are going to be some training exercises that you can use smaller maps for, just to get a feel for the mechanics of the game and kind of a step learning approach. And then you have the battle maps, then you have the campaign, which is fantastic because you start off with something small, maybe a couple dozen counters just to learn the mechanics of the game, build up from there. Then you have these individual battles, and then you can play the full campaign. So you don't have to break out the operational and strategic maps every time you want to play it and play the full campaign. No, you can sit down and just play a full battle using all of the rules with a small, very manageable map, and just knock it out in a couple hours a day, whatever it is that you're going to take to play it. And I think that's fantastic. Beautifully done map. Love the graphics on it. Love the feel. It's got a coating on it, similar to what we see from Thin Red Line Games, just to help protect the map. Just fantastic quality. We have several trackers here. We're going to go through each of these. At the top, we have the General Track, Recce Air, Special Forces missions, transport, and railroad capacity are all going to be tracked for both NATO and Warsaw Pact at the top. The top right, we have victory points, supply points, world opinion, and the battles won. In the middle here, we have the Air Naval Combat Resolution track, Game Turn track, and the DEFCON track. On the left and right sides, you're going to see these holding boxes, and these are going to be for your air missions for both the NATO and Warsaw Pact. These will be where you place your air, and then you select whether it's going to be for interception or offensive missions. Along the bottom, we have 3 different boxes on both sides. They're all the same. Use until detected, place on map, and place on sortie space. And like I said, we have one for the Warsaw Pact on the right-hand side, but really love the graphics on these. These are beautifully done maps, just exactly what we expect from Vuca simulations. And on the back of B1, we have scenarios B2 and B3 for the Berlin blockade and the North German plains. Same information that you saw on the front map, except now we're expanding it to add in some naval aspects. We've got mining levels out on the sea areas, and then we've also got entry zone for interdiction boxes on the right-hand side for the Warsaw Pact. Everything else, though, is going to be very similar boxes to what you saw on the front, just expanded more because this is going to be a wider area of operations and there's going to be a lot more action, a lot more counters in these scenarios. And then the final battle map is Battle Map 4 for the Bavarian option, as it says at the top left. And you see much smaller area of operations, so fewer airfields, but all the same information that we've seen on the other battle maps. On the back of the B4 map, we have a couple of the exercise maps. This on the left-hand side is going to be Northern Oil, and on the right-hand side is going to be Baltops. These are part of the 10 exercises that you're going to run through to learn the rules at different levels. A couple of them even use the strategic map to teach you aspects of the strategic game. Now we'll take a look at the rest of the exercise maps. This is exercise map 1. This is going to be used for several scenarios when you're doing your exercise training scenarios. As you can see, small areas, so it's going to be low counter density, just to kind of step you through learning different aspects of the game. On the back, we have exercise map 2, exercise map 4, Sudan, 1989. On the back, we have exercise map 6, the North Sea. And then the final exercise map 10 for Reforger. And then we close out these small maps with a planning map that is included with the game as well. Next, we have the 2 big drivers for the game, the strategic map, and then next, the operational map. On the strategic map, each of these hexes is 280 kilometers. On the operational map, where you drill down and get into the action, it's 28 kilometers. This is where you're going to be holding your units and moving them across to get into the battle itself. How you get into the battle is you move into these transition hexes, the lighter blue hexes here, move in there, then you immediately move those units to the operational hex. So that way you can have your forces here as you're moving them across the board, and then you want to get them into battle, you get them into the transition hexes, they move on to the operational map. As you can see, we've got the map legend at the top left, we've got a USA holding box on the left-hand side, USA entry hexes and the South entry hexes on the bottom. At the top, we have the Arctic entry, Arctic Bastion entry, and then the Bastion entry hexes. On the right-hand side, we have the Arctic holding box, Bastion, East, and the South holding boxes. Then we have the South France holding box here, and then the West holding box. We've got an area of operations from Canada through to Iceland, all the way into Europe itself. Beautifully done map, and I love the color scheme on it because it gives you the definite difference that you're not on the operational map, you are on the strategic map. The operational map is going to look like the other ones. You're going to have green rolling hills, you're going to have mountains, all those things that you expect to see on an operational map. And lastly, we have the operational map. This is the northern portion of the map. I'm going to show you the southern after this. I can't lay them out right here. I don't have the focal length on the camera to show them to you both side by side, so we'll just look at them one at a time. The northern section, as I said here, you can see the mega hexes. This is going to be 10 hexes across, 280 kilometers is going to be each of these mega hexes. Each individual hex is 28 kilometers. We've got the southern tip of Norway, Denmark, as well as the southern tip of Sweden. Then we get into East and West Germany at the bottom. And here is the southern portion of the operational map. We've got just a bottom tip of England here at the top left, and then the rest we've moved back into Germany, France, Yugoslavia, and surrounding areas for this portion of the operational map. Beautifully done. I really love the graphics on this. I love the terrain. Everything stands out, very, very easy to read. And I really do like the way they did the hex numbers, because the hex numbers are important. You have to know where your hexes are when you're tracking things, moving things, setting things up, stuff like that. They're kind of subdued, but they're very easily readable. I know that almost sounds kind of like an oxymoron, but a lot of maps will have those where they pop out like in really bright white letters or bright white numbers, and you can see them very easily. But to me, they kind of detract from the beauty of the map itself. Here, you can easily read these hex numbers without any problems at all, and they're diffused enough to where they don't take away from the beauty of the map. And this is a really gorgeous map. Fantastic job, once again, by Vuca. And the last bit we'll look at for the maps are the trackers. And we saw the operational map. It was a beautifully done map, but there are no trackers on it that we saw on the battle maps. That's why all this information, for the most part, looks very familiar to you. You've already seen it. Victory point track, your general track, your air naval combat resolution, all of that is on the battle maps. DEFCON track, your turn track, all that stuff you've already seen. But there are some new additions. You have your weather and initiative, as well as the allowed naval movements, which we did see on a couple of battle maps. But the biggest addition is the sequence of play, so that we can keep track of all the steps of the game as you go along. You have your strategic stage, administrative stage, first action, second action, and third action stages, as well as the end stage. And this is where it's going to break down for you what's going to happen in each of these stages, which is going to help you along, because there's a lot of steps. It's a complex game. There's a lot of layers to it. This will help you keep track of where you are in each stage and what the next step is. So it's going to be separate from the operational map. Just put it on the side, and it does not take away from the operational map itself, which I think is fantastic. Next, we'll take a look at the player aid booklet. This is a 12-page full-color booklet. It has all the charts and tables you'll need. I'm not going to go over each of them. I'm just going to flip through so you can see all of the charts and tables there are, and there are a lot. And it's going to give you all the steps that you're going to need to play all aspects of the game. You have your missile tables, detection tables, convoy reinforcements, victory points, marker legends, sequence of play broken down for you, US, British, German, and French range characteristics. Then on the back you have the counter legend, which will break down all the different counters that you have in the game, national symbols, unit symbols, feature symbols, ratings and ranges, as well as your headquarters capabilities and all the national flags for both sides. Then we have a pad of sheets that you'll be using to track your hit registers on the ADN, your air defense networks, for both NATO and Warsaw Pact. Next, we'll take a look at the setup sheets for the exercise, battle, and campaign scenarios. We're not going to go through each of them individually because there are 25. So we're just going to kind of glance through and kind of flip through, and just want to point out to you the differences in the exercise, the battles, and then the campaign itself. You can see up here we've got exercise 1, exercise 2, 3, and 4. So you can see the counter density for each of them. Able Archer, for example, is only 4 counters. Red Flag, you've got a couple dozen. You've got a little more than a dozen in the top and bottom scenarios. So you can see low counter density. It's going to ease you into the game, teaching the mechanics, get you to playing, but you're not going to be overwhelmed with giant stacks of counters all across the map. Then we jump up to exercise 8, Birds and Wolves. This is going to be a naval scenario, and you can see there's a higher counter density here because you're dealing with aircraft as well as naval forces, both subsurface and surface. Now that we've gone through all of the exercise scenarios, we're moving on to the battle scenarios. So you're seeing a greater increase in the number of counters for each of these scenarios. Battle 1, Fulda Gap. This is the NATO setup. Then we have the Warsaw Pact setup. There are more counters too, but we're going to also look real quickly at the reinforcements for both NATO and Warsaw Pact for Battle Map 1, Fulda Gap. And then we'll take a look at a couple of the campaign scenarios, Land of Confusion and Two Tribes. This is the Warsaw Pact setup and reinforcements. Sheet 1 of 3, as you see at the top. We're also going to look at the NATO sheets. There's 1, 2, and 3. Then we have the NATO setup, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that's why we're not going to go through all 25 sheets because they're double-sided, so it's actually 50 sheets if you wanted to flip both sides back and forth. But I wanted to give you an idea of the scope of the game and how many scenarios you got, and the breadth of the OOB for each of these scenarios. There's a lot in this game. It's going to be one that you could play for many years to come. Then we have the operational map air bases for both NATO and the Warsaw Pact. There are 11 of these. We don't need to go through them. I just wanted to show you that there are 11 additional ones. This is going to be used for the campaign game where the operational map does not have these like we saw on the battle maps. They're going to function in the exact same way. This is where you're going to be holding your air bases and assigning missions, either interception or offensive. Next, we'll take a look at the counter sheets that come with the game, and there are 24 counter sheets. As the back of the box, we saw that said 2006 counters in the game. So we're not going to go through each of these individually. We're going to flip through them kind of like we did with the scenario setup sheets. But you can see the art on these. The quality is fantastic, standard for Vuca simulations. You've got all the unit information that you're going to need on each of them. You got ground forces, some air forces here for NATO. You're going to have your silhouette of the unit as well as the NATO symbol. So you have best of both worlds. If you're a fan of having the silhouette, it's going to be on there. If you're a fan of just seeing the NATO symbol, that is also going to be on there, along with all of the pertinent information for that unit. Along with the ground forces and some of the air forces here, we've also got headquarters units. On the next sheet, we have more NATO ground forces, as well as some more helicopters and headquarters. Then we jump ahead a few sheets and we've got some Warsaw Pact forces and some nuke counters down at the bottom right. Then a few more pages on, we have the rest of the Warsaw Pact forces and the beginning of the NATO air forces at the bottom. Quite a few sheets of air forces. Now we're into the Warsaw Pact aircraft. Then we have NATO and Warsaw Pact subsurface as well as some surface forces. And then we get into the administrative counters at the bottom. And then the remaining 9 sheets are all going to be administrative counters that you'll be using for tracking missiles, threats, cap, whether it's detected or not, reserve mode, assault types, recon, your strengths, and then whether you get breakthroughs, standoff weapons are used. Then we finish on the counter sheet with mined, destroyed, and refugee counters. Next up, we have the cards, and these, as I said before, are optional. These are not something that's part of the base game. These are optional that you can use if you choose to do so. You'll get a hand of cards. You have a NATO deck and a Warsaw Pact deck. There's going to be an event, and there's going to be supply points at the bottom. And when you play these, you'll play 2 of them at a time. You're going to use them either for the supply points or for the event. And these will add some extra flavor to the game if you choose to use them. Again, like I said, these are optional. They're not a mandatory part of the game. Next, we'll take a look at the rules. This is a 55-page full-color rulebook. Inside of the front cover, we start off with the table of contents. It's going to list out all the rules and their associated page numbers. And we start off with the standard game rules on page 4. Gives you the introduction, rules, organization, scale, map scale, time scale, unit scale, the operational map, hex control, neutral countries. The strategic map's going to explain to you all the components here and how they're used, along with the tracks. Then you have your counter legend, which we saw on the player aids. That's going to explain to you how to understand all aspects of the counters. And then we get to the general concepts. Initiative, battles won, command hierarchy, formations, units, ground unit combat formations, and then unit modes. Fog of war, interception, zones of control, your EZOCs, sequence of play outline, setup instructions, and then the sequence of play outline is going to be over here graphically on the next sheet. Further information on the game turn, world opinion, initiative determination, assessing reinforcements, unit assignment phase, ground unit modes, naval unit modes, air unit modes, supply, lines of supply, supply levels, supply points. Remember, we looked at those cards. You get your supply points. You can get those extra supply points from the cards, but there are supply points that come in each of the scenarios. The action stages, and it's going to break down all steps in the action stages for you. Stacking, movement, different types of movement you see here, ground unit movement, railroad movement, naval unit movement, transport, theater transport, combat transport, movement in and out of holding boxes on the strategic map, reinforcements, POMCUS, reinforcements arriving by sea, mobilization, map edge and holding boxes, line of communication, which is advanced game only, because remember there's a standard and then there's the advanced game, and there's also optional roles. Detection, explained to you. Combat on page 18. ground war, long-range missile units, ground unit modes, frontline mode, reserve mode, ground unit combat formations, advanced to contact, hasty assault, deliberate assault, hasty defense, deliberate defense, and ground unit troop quality. You have battle hardened and regular, then ground-to-ground combat, all the prerequisites for that. Artillery support, close air support, battles won, cleanup, movement after ground combat, resolution, retreats, advance after combat, ground-air combat. And we have an example here, ground-air combat, illustrated example for you. As you can see, a lot of illustrated examples, call-out boxes giving you a lot of additional information or giving you support information for all the different aspects of the game. The Air War, Emergency Air Base, EABs, sortie rates, forward operating bases, your FOBs, airports, air units, DA and AWACS, multi-role aircraft, interceptors, surface strike, multi-strike, subsurface strike, air unit modes, interception mode, offensive mode. Because remember, we looked at the air bases before. You have offensive mode and interception mode, and that's going to explain it to you there. Your air combat missions, air-to-air interceptions, CAP. Going to run your combat air patrols, offensive mode, air superiority, surface strikes, anti-ship strikes, close air support, interdiction strikes, reconnaissance air missions, mine laying and mine sweeping, air-to-air combat with standoff weapons if you're going to be BVR, beyond visual range, air-naval combat, air defense network combat. Remember, we saw that sheet of papers. That's for keeping track of the damage to your ADN. Aircraft carriers, submarines, anti-submarine warfare, anti-air warfare, anti-ship missiles, naval ground combat, naval interception, naval air combat, mine sweeping, convoys. There's a lot here in this game. Screening forces, amphibious transport by sea into coastal hexes, DEFCON track, nuclear warfare. And then we get to the chemical warfare and end stage. Then we have the victory conditions. And then on page 41 is where you start the advanced game rules. So the first 38 pages or so of the game are going to be just the advanced or the basic rules. And then we get into the advanced rules. That's where you're going to get into the strategic map, intermap actions. Remember how you transition from the strategic map onto the operational map. Neutral countries, detection, Norway FIBA, the air war, naval war, special forces. And we have SF raids, supply of Warsaw Pact ground units, and then we get to optional rules here on page 46. We have bridges and doctrines. This is kind of neat. I think you have doctrines for both NATO and Warsaw Pact. For Warsaw Pact, no retreat. KGB units would have taken position immediately behind regular ground combat troops. They would have shot anyone retreating. Retreat was not an option for Warsaw Pact commanders, not even for tactical reasons. Warsaw Pact may not use Rule 15.5.2, tactical withdrawal, nor may they transform hits into retreats. So that's pretty cool. You have CAS here, and Echelon, assault from March, and then for NATO you have chemical warfare and air-land battle. So I like how they're using that doctrinal adherence for both of the sides to give a little bit more historicity to it, even though this is not a historical war because it didn't happen, but it's adding a little bit more of the period doctrine for both sides to add a little extra flavor to it. And you don't have to use it if you don't want to. It's all optional rules. Friendly fire, hardened air bases, in-flight refueling, single sortie strike missions, stealth, SSBNs, weather, wild weasels, EF-111A Ravens and EA-6B Prowlers, civil shipping, Dr. Strangelove, damage capital ships, and then the cards, which we talked about, which are optional. Damage assessment, and then we get into scenarios. Remember, we looked at those scenario maps, the exercise map. You have 10 exercises, then you have 6 medium-sized battle scenarios, then you have 4 campaign scenarios. So plenty to play here in this game. Then on page 50, we start with the glossary and abbreviations. That carries on for a couple pages. Then we have the index starting on page 53, and that goes out to the back of the rulebook. And lastly, we have the scenario book. This is a 46-page full-color book. Instead of the front cover, we have the NATO unit illustrations. We start off on page 3 with the table of contents, listing out all the scenarios and their associated page numbers. Then we have an introduction breaking down all of the scenarios, how they're set up in the book. Then we start off with the exercise scenarios. First one is crossing swords, and it's going to give you how many counters are going to be used. In this one, it's going to be 18. Scenario length is going to be 5 turns, and the exercise map E1 will be used. Then you have your briefing, scenario size, sequence of play, setup reinforcements, special scenario rules, and then the victory conditions, as well as all the markers that'll be used on the map or any of the tracks that are on that map. There's some variants down here as well, so that way you can change it up as you go along. If you play it multiple times, you can change it up with some variants. Then we get into the second scenario, which is Able Archer, Missile Combat. Scenario 3, Red Flag. Then 4 is Saddam, 1989. Ball Tops, North Sea, Red October, Birds and Wolves, Northern Oil, and then Reforger. Those are your exercises. That's the ones using those small maps just to get you in the swing of things and understanding the mechanics. Then we get into the battle scenarios. They're going to be a little bit more involved. You saw the maps are going to be varying in size, the different areas that you're going to be fighting over. Start off with Scenario 1, Fulda Gap. You see there's a lot more information here for those scenarios. Berlin Blockade, North German Plains, Bavarian Option, and then we have Miami 1989, Valkyrie's Embrace, and then we get to the campaign scenarios. First one is 99 Red Balloons. Number 2 is We Didn't Start the Fire. 3 is Land of Confusion. I'm sensing a theme here. I don't know about you guys, but I definitely are. 2 Tribes, and then we get into rules examples on page 19. And this is going to give you an illustrated breakdown of different aspects of the game. A bunch of different mechanics like ground-to-ground combat, cruise missiles in the advanced game, battle hardened at the top there, retreat, air-to-air interception. All this is going to be broken down with illustrated examples, which are fantastic. Then you have your cap, air-to-air BVR combat, air-naval combat, air defense networks. So you can see how all of them work with several different pages of illustrated instructions. Then you have convoys in the advanced game, Warsaw Pact supply in the advanced game only, intermap movement, detection in the advanced game, NordCap, SF raids, variable aircraft speed and optional rules. Then we have the battle scenario Fulda Gap air playthrough. So it's going to give you a playthrough of how that works. So you can follow along with it, put some counters down on the map, play through it, and then you get a feel for it. Same for the battle scenario Fulda Gap ground playthrough. So that way you can play along with it and you can see all the mechanics in action as it's taught to you. Then we have the designer's notes, then the historical timeline, and then the hypothetical timeline to coincide with that. Then we have the publisher's notes, and then the order of battle on page 45. We have resources here on page 46, and then the Warsaw Pact unit illustrations at the back of the scenario book. And that is a look at everything you get inside of Red Strike, Air, Land, and Naval Combat in Central Europe, 1989. This is a game designed by Yves Bretel and was published by Vuca Simulations. Well, this game has been really anticipated for quite a while, and deservedly so. Yves done a great job on this game. It is just chock full of goodness, and Vuca just knocked it out of the park. The component quality of this is absolutely fantastic, and Vuca has jumped to the top of the list, in my opinion, as far as the quality of their productions. You know, they're just fantastic. The excellent level of not only production, but their customer support is just really awesome. The game itself, there's a lot of layers to it. There's a lot of things to get into, but the way Yves designed it, he has it set to where you can go through your 10 scenarios to kind of learn each of the different aspects of it. Then you get into the battle scenarios. So you're managing a little bit more now, getting into the moderate scenarios. Then you have 4 campaigns where you can really dive deep into it and get into all aspects of the game. So I really love that stepped learning approach as you kind of ease into the system, and then you can just take on the whole thing once you're confident with it. Plus, we also have the train up videos, 40 of them out there for you, and there are more on the way. So you can enjoy those also. Those are on the channel. That'll help reinforce what's in the rulebook, and this way you can see the examples of how these mechanics work that you've read about in the rulebook instead of just relying on the written words. So that also will help. But I'm just really excited to have this and looking forward to digging into it and having a hell of a good time with it. So if you've been curious about this and you're into hypothetical World War III, this I think is one of those must-haves right now. And you can go ahead and you can place your order, and it is available now. So jump on it before it goes out of stock. Well, I hope that helps you guys out if you've been curious about this one. If you have any comments or questions, post them down below. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.